I'm Vitaly, friends, I'm Vita. Against the rest of you, and it is known that we are against the judicial process. And within the framework of not publicly in the American media, according to the mayor's plan, yak we know. We will express ourselves in the old-fashioned American media literally sprat, you're not in that. And revealing everything I don't sing on don't pass for the administration of Donald Trump. The fact that all active ideas are even before the implementation of these plans. Toys. And in me the torture. And it became a chip I also boof about in public. Such intense, we would not have sent Donald Trump to the plan and him. And you and I are also Bach. We are on the right with a raw document, and I am not worth it at the lowest. For Clay, not with Kiev, not with the European Union. Unaffected by the reaction of Russians like Kirill Dmitriev, I really praise Vladimir Putin's decision. And I developed the object not according to the court plan. Obviously Kirill Dmitriev in the American media, we don't even know, it's already developing and developing like this. And our today's broadcast will be a highlighted process. Because you're on the process, but with a sample still as a result. There was a trip by Steve Withoff and Jared Kushner to the Russian capital. There were a few rounds on the Mish American representatives and the Ukrainian delegation at the beginning of the mayors. As we know, we mark everything up to the workshop. And by virtual lime. Tomorrow, after all, there will be a meeting with the European leader and a send-off in London. Emmanuel Macron, obviously, is glad to have a new lawsuit against the Russian Federation, having flown to Beijing to no avail. As one can understand from the reaction of the French president, the head of the People's Republic of China Xi Jinping, without taking seriously the propositions, could have stuck out the European leader and with artificiality in Russia against Ukraine. What are we today? From one side, we are more optimistic for literally from the other side. So says the President of Ukraine, so says European officials. That's what Donald Trump says, that's what Keith Kellogg says. And the representation of the American administration. Another mayor firm close, and it will still be possible to get the result literally for a Sprat Tisney. Which ended with Siga Sprat torturing the principals, and work on it. Even Nikola has not yet been so short, and not yet bright real to the point, that the Russian Federation is being seriously put in Zagoli, not Maya, then Ukraine is absolutely unreasonable with the received states. The European Union is elected to be added by Flushing. In those situations, I would say that the false information is on itself destabilizing the Ukrainian. And I also had Putin's task of washing away the Sudomir plan for Tilky for sanctions against naphtha companies of the Russian Federation. To the class of new crocs for destabilizing Ukraine, we can say that there are still a lot of people there. I am irrationally adored by the wine process that the wine is over and does not want to say. that we are extremely those who can continue the wine does not want to, not that the rumor, but you. You see that from the point of view, you don't know about politics, and we don't know about politics yet. I am still such serious leaders of the President of the United States. So you are seriously dealing with the problem, you are in contact with the President of the Russian Federation. You are in contact with the head of the People's Republic of China. I can't, like white noise. And that of the President of the Russian Federation, I would say a full-time tactician. White noise means Buddha is white noise. We're pulling the ropes. We also have in truth the main problem of the agricultural plan for today. And so the Americans and Europeans say so, lying in territorial actions and guarantees. And Tesh is not Trebitz in Specialists, which of course still looks like he will see reality. Real on territorial acts of torture, the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops beyond the territory of the Donetsk region and prices, could stat a real move to break through the fighting. Which in itself looks logical from the point of view of the Russian position. Because Russia will continue to talk about the so-called Nazi regime in Kiev. And the Ukrainian troops will withdraw from the Donetsk region, and the status quo will be heard on all the lines of the ZIT. This will mean that the so-called Nazi regime is continuing and is getting old. Russia has not yet managed to get our regime, and the pretense of Ukraine as a satellite power on the territory of the Russian Federation. Then you still require the Russian Federation to fight with four hands for the Kramatorsk Slavs. The same is absolutely not the reason for overestimating the share of those territories of the reserve Kherson regions, which are formally annexed by the Russian Federation, but are actually under the control of the Ukrainian army, including with the regional center and pseudo-subjects of the Russian Federation for Paris and Kherson. We are going to mark that from the point of view of the Constitution of Russia, the regional centers of the Russian regions, and Melitopol, there is a new Kakhovka of the place of visit of pseudo-regional administrations of the subjects of the Russian Federation. So it turns out that it is possible to withdraw before the principles are tested, but from the annexed territories. It is possible not to withdraw from the temple. It's also true that the Russians are buckets of frozen conflict, and it does not turn off. It can be seen that the conflict does not require the type of Ukrainian visas for the territories caused. It is absolutely unreasonable, and conclusions will be extorted in one subject of the Russian Federation. And they will not be extorted. In truth, we are talking about the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donbass in exchange. We can exhale two versions of what Putin is trying. The Persia version for me is the greatest. It is obvious that the single task of the President of Russia Primus and the President of Ukraine officially recognize the fact that the Ukrainian troops will cover all the territories with such a rank, to destabilize Ukraine and bury its entire territory against the coming months as a result of the collapse of the army. To the fact that the President of Russia with such a rank has gone to the Gromadian fault in Ukraine, and the destabilization was allegedly provoked by his bearded agent and has not gone anywhere. I want to tell you, Tesh, what do you think, that we have Bilshi on the Russian agents in May? Extremely I have shown and said, and show in 2020 another, and I will hide the agents. On which seats and landings both of them were really achieved in 2026. Donald Trump and his elevated administration. On Ukraine and with conclusions not and in Donbass. And I believe in prices, I'm on these such options wiring. Destabilization is a headache. In Java, that Putin, Razravaya not for destabilization, but Desno. We can extort the conclusions of the Ukrainian in the territory of the Donetsk region, yak for propa on him in the fire. The fact that we cannot be aware of the problems that have emerged in the Russian economy and in the Russian reset forces. And we can also respect the President of Russia would like to give his army an hour to prepare for a new strike on Ukraine. In those situations, classes in failure are strategically important for its territory, with places and fort. Yaki the Russian army can still continue and brother rock to others both in spending and on the battlefield. I am not wasting Russians for pennies, but Putin is carrying out these beatings for the initial mobilization. Get up. And this, of course, is that an agreement will be concluded, as by destabilizing Ukraine. And the Ukrainians will be extremely enthusiastic to the point that their army leaves the territory for having won with their hands. They will be but strategic positions for the Russian army. According to the land will be available at the point, it will be possible to interpret at the point of the collapse of Ukraine. And a new offensive will be simple. The Russian army firm richly built, I would say, it occupies comfortable positions until today. Well, plus, again, I guess she's in such a good mood. It will be absolutely obvious that the conflict on the stake for the Whig and the Kherson regions are frozen, and it was written on my land. That the parties are tied up with this clinging by the miry Shlyak, you are perfectly well, of course. The Russian federations are absolutely spitting on what is written. And I also piss Kola, she will destroy all the articles by the water, it will make Donald Trump angry at her. Well, don't make my capty laugh. But we've already been hammered by Donald Trump. Nothing and ridicule and trickery pull the president of the Russian Federation. The Russian political temple has no Viklaika. And the fact that Putin is being put on the stand for Trumpists and Trumpian sharpening, it was possible to beat absolutely. But everything is recorded. I have oysters with Trump's son-in-law himself. Check his age, and absolutely mentally belittling. What you and I know perfectly well is that Putin is mentally turned off. Respecting a serious dialogue, I will indirect their chicory a lot. Identify Putin, Zap on Jinping does not reveal. This is Kushner's and Vit on the political mat of the Russian Federation. Proimel is not up to the cabinet of the president of the Russian Federation. Even in the dark, these people are not going to fix the president of the Russian Federation, and they will not. Tsarsko, such I said, Dil Kaif serious security officers allow Tilky frozen and look to the camp troop. That's still the need to know. And people are starting Vera. It was honest, Sprats firm people. You do not forget that we are ashamed of my right. I voted 2000 of the 19th hand for the mayor from Russia. This is important with people. It is still possible to believe in the spending of territory by the gentry, and this is what Putin needs. TPPR of a food friend. They can talk seriously. Trying to guarantee that's not yak can't agree on guarantees. That we do not give absolute and real extinction from the list. But we are plotting with you on the way to the ether shop, and the ether ahead of time against the uprising speech. Another single real guarantee in Europe, in the case of European Ukraine before NATO. And our yaks are good fellows, even in that hour, we were wiped out for voting for pro-Russian politicians. For socialists, communists and oligarchic parties in the Verkhovna Rada. For bullshit, I was engaged in Ukrainian elections in the 90s. Type 2000 plots. For you there is a vote of two revolutions, voting after the revolution on here. And so now there was, I would say, stability and understanding that we and so, all these Ukrainians joined, and donate. And the Litpi in exchange for trying to clean up the bales, guarantees that the decline of Russia's nuclear attack over the attempt. From the participation of the largest nuclear power, from the participant retinue. And you can't find a single and such a nuclear superpower in Europe, and a nuclear power with a staff in Europe. It will protect the European Ukraine because it has a lot. Before Donald Trump appeared in the Oval Office in the 25th lesson of 2000. Everything was absolutely in still Euro-Atlantic solidarity on. After all, the Persia rule of Donald Trump is the same absolutely not with a direct look at the bark of NATO saved the Europeans in the future. There has never been a Russian-Ukrainian fault in this on such a scale. And Donald Trump is talking about unfitness. Finance NATO, Ukraine and NATO, alliances with theirs, and talks about solidarity in the topic. To PPR for this, it is also important to read the National Sea Strategy obtained in the state. You and I cannot guarantee from the date of Latvia, Estonia and Poland that the United States will be at war with them because of Russia's attack on them. And Russia knows this. We are also bashing the very idea of Donald Trump, the idea of the ultra-right political forces in America. Allegedly the party called it post-fascist and fascist. Well, let's call it by their names. We have fields from those received in the state on the undercob of the 20th. And before the 19th century, Latin America was the only zone of interest from the received states. And this skin is contagious to the fact that from the receipt of the state, there was a single economical hubbub to the continent. But for the absolute alternative to the economical one from the received states in Latin America and the People's Republic of China. And Ukraine will be its economically spheres, America will automatically be knocked down by its economically spheres. In addition, we are talking about American diplomacy canonaro by the 19th old man. That we diplomacy was provided with economical from the received states to the expansion of their companies and an alternative. And a friend who absolutely did not bother with the received states from the point of view of democracy. As a result, a dictatorship. I have seen them not interest. And it looks like the powers have seen their interest, so it's political for us. And if so not for what you want to buy and Ukraine really control that, in principle. Renisha she has seen in the principle of American politics. The Americans excused the dictatorships there was in Iraq, and who knows for Trump, then you are there for the elections. And Vilnius elections absolutely will not produce that administration before the Lord. I and think it's you yourself, with your imperious handles all the tools of power. So. And NATO is also a guarantee for Europe, by us for Central Europe, or else the Americans give us the most guarantees. Rockets. Groshina is on defense, and wants to give us contagiously, and we are fighting. That since May, as if such that the greatest nuclear attempt in the history of Lutz can be seen to attack. Nadig does not want to fight, he is afraid of nuclear guilt. And Trump's tiki is hanging out. That's what happened in May, as if in Ukraine, to attract the Russian Federation so much. Putin's, I'm in trouble with the victims. And coldly to the Ukrainian strikes on Belgorod, posh Russian places, respecting the direct evidence for Russians. that Ukraine is a wife of stability and guilt before the liquidation of the power. Canada and the Russians calmly demand to tell the truth. In about one of the receiving states, the brothers of the real fate are elected for their allies, partners. All of their non-guarantees are turned off by not me, as real guarantees could freeze Ukraine in Russia, not different in nature. The two fates of the most received states at Veni from the deadbolt of the nuclear component in Vienna. And the economical political destabilization of the Russian Federation with the generation of an internal rat of such strength. Russians deal with such problems. There will be no guarantee of Russia's guilt against Ukraine yet. Warranty pi guilt of Russia against Ukraine in the purpose-foldable domestic political period. Russia. Not going to fight from Ukraine and normal to the territory. With one single that we can become strong enough power, become a member of NATO, and the Russian rats stagnate. I will no longer be like Trump and Trumpism, but the ideology itself will be sued from getting the state to turn to forecasts. There we have problems in the truth, and we don't want to lie off topic. The problem with the soap by the water is that the idiotic peace year itself is talking. That hour is completed in a fire on the line. I will repeat once again what I say on all the airwaves, and I will repeat it in the wrong way. I still feel you still who we are in the years of the mind yak diagnosis. That the wine will be food on the mind, still the wine is being completed. I am ready to discuss the supplies in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front, not shoes on the line. The Russian Federation can also extort in the brightness of the mind, propa in the fire of Ukrainian visas. Say from the territory of Donetsk and Zersk and Kherson regions. And we can perform. We can extort more Russian troops, scrolls from the video went to join, and say that they will not. The logic itself is not the logic of a peace treaty. Do not give up in Ukraine, not I could not for what you just said, we are in the fire, and we will be attacked again. So it may sound like the Russian-Ukrainian screech of the 20s and 40s. Maybe tiki, and we can go to the stage of Israel, with personal and post, and mobilizations for Ukrainian territories, from Ukrainian territories. We may contact you in the Israelites in 1940 Vaseman, kind of wine fought for Israel. I didn't know yet 56 and skin wine put pizza, not the foundation of the Jewish state like that. Our Dainu and win the war, as to put a crab on the torture of the foundation of Ukraine. And no one will doubt the stability of the foundation of our state. And before that, the grandchildren of the participating Ukrainians will pass the task. It's rich that Ukrainians turned out to want to conquer before and do not want to overstate this blame. And well, as I won't, you will also take the blame. You gain nothing. Your task sails it well that he can't fight or struggle. The mind is not more profitable than the prip is not on fire in the fire. And if Pramar can tip with 2020 other lesson, the conference on the widow of Ukraine. And nafty torture on do not know the wine. Everything was so different from the fact that it was extremely important for him to go to the podium there in Italian Switzerland. A beautiful month. I love you too. And Nikola did not know that the slander of Ukraine is visible in the hour there is wine being sharpened, and the smart rock is over. That's the trick. The moment that we did not come to the specifics. We will continue to negotiate, and the articles are not allegedly visible in the fire. Territorial torture and guarantees are clearly on fire. And Ukraine's neutrality, Pitny and Pitny territorial integrity, Pitny status Indexowania Russian territories. The torture of the humanitarian political nature of how to lock up that absolutely logical situation. Lifted into the fire. You're shoving a military camp. Ogolo elections Gidney with Ukrainian legislation. And their conduct. We are not with the right people, but you are the mandate. To the fact that those people of the election campaign, and the new president of Ukraine, and the deputies, will clearly speak to their Spiv Hromadyan, Yaki and Dave, and will defend the peace process now. And its prominent referendum for the Yak on the Truth Ukrainian continuation. And Russia is coming out. In the 2019 kind of Ukraine, held its presidential parliamentary elections, and I took a referendum in Moscow. I took it wrong. And we know that I am also one of the Russian military leaders. After speaking, we prayed. Kola, she also respected another 700 in us for them, and 30 about will not take Ukraine yet. And you think I'm a test of sociology, a test of interpretation of the presidential election. In the choice of the president to be added from Ukraine, from Russia to surrender a priori, and 300 in Petro Poroshenko, are not important to the gang, quietly for Ukraine by Russian troops, and in a warehouse. People, of course, in those lists there were warehouses on the Russian side of the Ukrainian land. That's it. Everything is already just 300 cut out, 70 just accept us all. It doesn't matter if you accept them. It was absolutely wrong in that it was important, he did not adore capitulation from Russia. But absolutely overbearing absolute ignorance of reality. It is also possible to respect the most dignified president of Ukraine for Putin. Capitulations unprofitable, not capitulations. Someone who wants to sell the series and wants to be choked in the cinema. Not all water under the tile. Well, it's just when draining. Well, briefly seeming. I just want to say and demand for the pro-Russian public. The choice is brisk. Well, and there the fork surrenders to the screw was a candidate for president. Kind of about positional block, right? And you voted, including choosing yourself in the Grand Tour extremely. I'm just the one from Poroshenko's choice. It was in 70-30 proportions. I haven't forgotten about you, and there is a different one here, of course. I'm still in those situations talking about you at the presidential election. He will vote for allegedly saying that we have a date with Putin. It's just in my opinion, the president will vote for such a party on the truth. Then I will not have any of this process for a real peace process. It is not yet like capitulation to say that she stands on tough patriotic positions, that she can and will talk to Putin about Ukrainian interests. In other words, this is what Moscow can achieve: a compromise. I am from the Ukrainian population. We have no guilt in the truth and did not become a Moscow Bogdyhen on Kalina. And I am not your guarantor. Ukrainians will vote logically. And I am not guaranteeing you in Russia the correct interpretation of the voice results. So the election may be the fault. We are the process and the chances. Chances. So we are talking about the logic of the prepa in the fire. And for up to such logic, there is also what is needed. I will need to go through it. Is obvious that the type is not like a windy bag, and then in those situations, you will be absolutely specific orientation of the policies. I can't tell you, and I somehow hear I can't tell you, and I will trump Namagasnut on Putin, that Putin has accepted it. Well, how should I put it? Comfortable minds, Mayor. For us, it is important that Trump, smushy from the wart of the Vagu, went to those results of sociological tests, even before Ukraine, both among Republicans and among democracy, and think more. And he will also be engaged in Putin's position. He will simply lose before choosing the road to impeachment. Then I do not see the barriers of the Senate from the point of view of the chamber in such situations. Not a problem, as you certainly have serious problems. At times, such an obvious situation. We also need more so that Trump, Namagayashi accept with this Putin, is accepted comfortably so much in order to influence Russia. What? Russia has weakened in the style that it was ready, accepted and uncomfortable. And the prospect is not close. That's how we call the analysis extremely over the tide ones. There will already be European oysters there. European partners on all these ideas are Americans. I will ask you to subscribe to the channel of those who are not subscribed to the airwaves. I will tell you in the Diaknaya that you know that we demo millions on the channel, and 10,000 tilki were heard so that the channel scored 1 million. So to the one who is not signed, sign. We are with you and the challenge until the new 2026 lesson. The channel of the channel millions. I'm Vyak, and Rez, and Hanukkah. On Hanukkah, this is already the 15th breast. So subscribe. Comment, put the channel's tools in the Podobake. We are going to try to torture overgrown on the air. For often it is subject about the positions before we have partners in the part with the formation and at once on the style, are close to collapse. Flailing is still, of course, a collapse honestly. The situation is extremely complicated at the front. I am so difficult, and everything will remain for. Extremely, we have problems C powers we have, and will remain so. When hiring. And these are optimistic figures. Extremely we have problems with the partner, and the fact that he can't for rich instrumental tortures, such as the torture of the finances of Ukraine, say, for 2026, the Shuka Shlyak, and I will be in the Shlyak, you know. Because again, no one in Europe wants the Russian army to come to the cordon of Europe. And here you are serious torture. What is it that we talked about the collapse? The Russian army is in Pokrovskaya, Marching for 2025th Rick. 4 years have passed. Allegedly, the Russians are swearing in Zagoli that they will take the Donetsk region for a sprat. To which I pulled out and went to Pokrovsk, without anyone saying that the offensive is a strategic center. It's easy for them to break away in the Donbass. All these battles along the entire front line, and do not result in seams with such psychological searches. And a demonstration of the Russian army. And we know more than see the front, the it and fight. It's on the offensive. This is absolutely more objective speech. And I'm for it. And it is also real for the Ukrainian state and the foundation. I'm what kind of sprat Rocky is there for you? Our defense Russians are very frequent on Ukrainian territory, at the gathering of Ukraine. To the ruins. It will pretend to be ruins. That's why I'm not afraid of anything good. I'm trying to collapse. Not a collapse. The more Russia fights in Ukraine, the closer it gets to two speeches, to an imperious economic collapse. I don't go to the 2026 kind in 20 and irrevocably. To think that the collapse of the Russian state is so bang, and can be seen in it. And my friend, yes, I will demand the scale of guilt on the European front. Because the Russians are fine, of course, while the Europeans are not all of them, but the Russians will pass their scale on discounts. A good torture of Europe's reaction. Vitaly, I will benefit. Why is Ukraine's fault chick and similar Shlyak, not a sword written another light fault? Even before Stremkov, economical increase cannot. Losses are not frequent sword. Yaki was divided between the West Exodus. There are few clear guarantees in the two largest nuclear extinction events in the history of humanity for our entire foundation. In Ukraine, and there are no people to hand over. The Federal Republic is not marked with a view. With the United States of America, and the guarantors and, in fact, the guarantees of the nuclear power of France, Great Britain, are actually frequent to the regime with the cob of occupation. The German democratically kept the guarantees honestly nuclear over the attempts of the Radian Union. And T also sweeps and Zahidny Berlin. I am in the middle of a hostile, uncontrolled troops and enviable allies. Not stability right up to the residual, you are solving the problem of its status, which was sharpened from 30 Ritchie. Ukraine is the difference between Zahidny Berlin. And it's not like it's not enviable, because there is no guarantee of a normal growth of investment in Ukraine, which is unclear and in nature today. And Zahida, and pretend it is not at the showcase of their confrontation. Well, on the stick, I went into the skin discounts of them. And she did not look so richly, not so the title of Socialist Ukraine for the fact that she needed a showcase. And those who make deposits to West Berlin in their investments, and of course that they finance the showcase for discounts, will be the whole showcase, and I will not give up a word. Well, they will be punished already about the fact that investments from the brigade in the Federal Republic themselves are in their role. So, and here it is possible to develop Ukraine extremely for the mind, and the fact that all the pennies will be in Ukraine, and will not be in Ukraine itself. So there are less and less pessimistic, optimistic forecasts. Even before that, I would say a simple moment, we will discuss with you. I would extremely like Ukraine to develop in this way, but on objective ambushes there are deposits of guarantees. And what does he express? We will also definitely find out more Ukraine, guaranteeing your own. Do not lie down with us, and they will not attack. Right? So, in the meantime, we will be able to use all sorts of sums to relax on the wall economical. Well, and Prokhov with the oblivion of the corruption system, the very management of Ukraine, and verticalized corruption in the Ukrainian itself and horizontally. We can get to Romania in 23 or 25. Well, 30. Trump is his publicly and is actually being led by Putin's agents. Cola, cut the elite of the USA, adequately buckets for good nutrition. I thank you for it. I don't think Trump is his administration's lead agent Putin. Their whole ideology is not the ideology of American isolationism. I was absolutely mainstream in the interwar period between and a friend of the wholly and richly American entrepreneurs and politicians. They called Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini. No one visited Hitler's agent Muslin. It was their ideology. Even in Europe, they will figure it out themselves. They still need an exiled hand. Hitler is not economical from the ruins. And most importantly, another valuable torture of America's influx. What is there of America in Europe? On the right, there is still a strong economic power. It is necessary. And for the Europeans, figure it out for yourself. We also have a respectful competition with China in the center of the car. And for the success of competition, if the unnecessary Russian neutrality leaves their national strategy, then they are led absolutely adequately. You just have their ideology, an ideology with an agency. I am not yet giving anything inadequate from the point of view of ideology in their activities. She will say that the American Vitaly, how to weave assertive China Nan for the presidency of Trump. I'm your prediction of his reaction. Trump won't fight these people. And I won't be ready for real aggression against Taiwan for no simple reason. These are economical errors. DOS is not good for the Chinese economy. Then I am just an opponent of China in the whole world, may soon have the status for the economical isolation of China. Because I am still for the economical isolation of China before serious social problems, upheavals will not be a pathological belt. Then in the rada of the attack on Taiwan explain why it is already in this gurch. That the fault of China with Taiwan we cannot trade with Ukraine is an aggressor. You're fine, of course, even before the attack. Russia to Ukraine, who else from German politicians, having said everything, we close the beer drips Nicola. Will show incomprehension in German, you are not the same flow of the Ukrainian space system. It's cheap gas. The fault is all the fault of primates on popular solutions. Ukraine is simply complicated by the fact that our leaders do not want primates on popular solutions to blame. I haven Ukraine to put I the process of Russification. Filtration axes right in the yards, so that's it. The referendum. From the skin of the Ukrainian region and the independence to the Russian Federation. Well, I'm in the occupied territories scenario. Moreover, I admit that Pershy-Rik 2 or 3 will be allowed to do this to the Ukrainian move. I'm in schools, but from defense. For private eye, the territories of the most loyal population will just be cleaned out. The same absolutely economical gentry. Let's just say that you want your apartment there Prodacia, Mats, power cut. It will be a whopper of the Russian Federation. Rik 4 too, of course. And those who will take passports and be loyal. So I will not choose economical. And with the choice of a passport, I will choose about the idea. Well, if we have one language in our country, well, what can we do? Russia can't do anything about it. People won't if they come out. And what about the elements from the partisan beard, but in the territories, so in the territories to lay Reeve? Close to the territory in the Russian civilization such. Pan Vitaly, supposedly middle-class Americans, looking like you are an unreasonable people. The Hromadians of Ukraine, with an incredibly reasonable decision, we are now voting in the 2019 kind. In the 2010, right about not riven, so and it's called I was mowing in a cow, and yours was silent. Oh, I just can't. You're glad. Extremely in favor of voting all over the world, still speaks, really is driven by the promise of new informative technologies. Absolutely recently, Donald Trump has been so TikTok. Extremely in those situations, we can also talk about the fact that at a time, the participants and the electors of the processes are the people of politics and came to the elections for a social extremely sounding. That's right. And American elections are also often voting for people, and their elections are not reasonable to you, voting for economical reasons. Also often sowing in a bad way. Often American votes produce depressions. The American vote is economical in fact. Tied with the current Rivnum at the moment. Besut, as you know, on the Kilco states. I can't you with positivity and the parties, there have been two political powers alone, since getting the state on the truth. And there can't be a political power in the state. The fact that the test is about the rose, the test is about orientation, and about economical preferences. And the test of Trump was not poured. I have now the choice in 2026 lesson. Democrats control the Houses of Parliament. And maybe about Donald Trump's impeachment. Well, I'm still legally speaking. I will still be impeached. Vice President J. Devens may become the new president with the staff received. And the Democrats will also impeach the new president by the hair. The vice president with the president received in the state will be the vice president removed in Congress. Senator, Congressman, Democrat. And with this rank, a Democrat will become president from the time he gets in the state until the election in 2028. The torture is rich. Impeachment of President Trump, girlfriend. Then it will be possible to impeach the vice president became president. Democrats flooded the control chambers of Congress. You know, you can't skip it. Here I am the torture. I am still the Democrats in the 2026 Euroth, control over at least not the chambers of the Congress chamber. And there will be absolutely rigidly Galmovity, all Trump's political initiatives are thinner. President Trump will pretend to be on a roll, and everyone will think about those who will be the new president, with the received in the state. And the Republicans will really joke about the elections of the period of Trumpism. I'm Anged and Trump. So maybe it is. We do not know about the Trump era, it may end with Trump's stay in Posad. It wasn't like that. Who from European countries at a time can become a leader in coping with the non-anti-Russian military coalition of Europe? You are joking with the leaders now, and the need is coming from the West. Of course. To the fact that the leader declares something with a split West. Winston Churchill was in a compromised position. Yaka snored at the landing of the Prime Minister in Britain. Tilka to the fact that the conservatives began a friend of holy wine and national identity, as a sign of demonstrating that he had infected the previous period. Allah Boris was not enough to ensure that the summoned leader of the Conservative Party did not be the prime minister in this country. And as a result, it is necessary to drop out a post. I'm not a little authority with the Conservative. I didn't take into account her Neville's party, and she couldn't get away. She is a serious figure of this party and authority. And they could see their leader Clement, the outgoing leader of the Labour Party, in the brightness of the Deputy Prime Minister's West. The readiness of the British to support the rupture of Churchill with Churchill, according to the article. I exchanged my looks for the need for an occasion in critical situations. So it is here. And there will also be a Western European soul on the opera. A group of politicians will show up ready to support such a thing. I am not the leader who is not needed here. I will not be such a choice that Ilya is ready to be added to these politicians from Russia as a leader if needed. Not the leaders of the ruble history, the history of the ruble with the slave peoples, with the Veda and the skin, who is up to the good king's jokes in the office. The story is full of people who stood on their bosom of the imperious. The role of specialness in history is practically minimal. Maximum recording of the number of people on the process. Although the biographies of people themselves stand in the way of these processes. But it is known. Obviously, people came to the West as well. And I just want a povo. What ideas? It can be seen that nothing will be heard as a result. I don't know. I thank you for being in the dark ether. I took such an improvised horseshoe for further hot days. We will talk about this with you. Guesses to them who errs without subscribing to the channel. Subscribe. I'll tell you that we have millions of demos on the channel, and we have heard too much. But our truth is not so rich. Our truth is not so rich. This one has less than 10,000 subscriptions in order for the channel to become millions of channels. So sign it, I'll be a good hook for you. Your podobeki, your comments, what do you think? I will develop further away so-called peace processes. That I will be verbally and richly in the cult and on the cheeks of our shan, and these tools channel and caress. Yes, help those dumped from Ukraine. This is still on the offensive, and it seems that the foundations of Ukraine will be the main guarantor of the political maps of the suite. And the Ukrainian people will be ethnographic. 2 trials, and you decide to seal her guilt for Ukrainian independence.